Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I'm here with Dr. Lisa. How are you in the middle of February now, right?
Not quite the middle of February, but I'm keeping every day. We're not there yet.
Slowing it down, slowing it
Yeah, slowing
down.
it down. Hey everyone. My pronouns are she, her. I am doing okay and not yet in the middle of February.
See, I have a good excuse to rush it though, Lisa, because my birthday is kind of in the middle, so at least I have something to look forward to creeping up
Mm-hmm.
on, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you're right.
Right.
We should not rush. We should not run one day at a time, one day at a time. But Lisa, let's get into this week's episode. We have a lot to talk about, and y'all just forgive us now because we know that we are going to be relatively politically leaning, given that everything is so very fresh here in the US in regards to having a very, very, very long and exhausting election cycle. And now
Mm-hmm.
many of us are in a situation that we now have dreaded for a very long time. And so, Lisa, I
Right.
sometimes wonder if this podcast isn't cathartic and therapeutic for us to just process this shit as it comes at us
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
fire hose here. But
Uh-huh.
Lisa, guide us into this word of the week that may help us to process some of this stuff.
Yes. So the word oligarchy is our word of the week, and you are probably more familiar with this now than you have been in the last several years because it is a word that has been batted around quite frequently in the last couple of months, not least in the former President Biden's farewell address that was about a month ago now. So we thought it would be a good idea to define that. So ultimately what oligarchy means is that it's a small group of people who are controlling the economy, controlling the power, running the government, right? So we often, for many of us, we might conjure up an image of Soviet Russia where, the quote unquote oligarchs had control of the economy, particularly before Putin's rise, where allegedly he told you will either go to prison or you will be loyal to me. And most of them chose loyalty, it sounds like. So the reason why this term oligarchy has been coming up here in the United States is of Trump's association with a number of very, very wealthy people, not least Elon Musk. But if you recall, at his inauguration, he was surrounded by several billionaires. So Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, to name a few. And they are the three richest people in the United States. And so there is chatter and concern and worry that since these wealthy white dudes are largely in it for themselves and wanting to continue to accrue their own wealth and power, that they are bending a knee to Trump, maintain that. And so how much influence do these unelected rich people have? Right. And so that has what has given rise to the labeling of this group of merry men, oligarchs or an
Mm-hmm.
oligarchy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I always talk about when it comes to especially socioeconomic privilege, are you using your powers for evil or for good?
Mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm.
we've seen, for example, some folks that are, up to their eyeballs in oogobs of money that use it for good and use their judgment for better, and then others that don't. And
Right.
so, based on the very intentional seeding and visibility of these folks, because the seeding and the visibility is very intentional with every US presidency. And so,
Mm-hmm.
given that, when I see these individuals seated very closely to the president, it is sickening because I don't see, nor have we often seen their specific powers used for good. So, what are we left to assume? It would be on brand for them to center themselves and not
Mm-hmm.
the entirety of the country. So, here we are. Here we are.
Yeah.
So if you never had oligarchy defined, now that Biden has thrown that out there for us to think about, I think it will be hard to unsee the oligarchy
Yeah.
now that
Yeah.
he's put it out there,
Yep.
So anyway, all right, let's dive into phase one with
All right.
oligarchy kind of simmering in the background here now. Um, Meta. Lisa, let me tell you how I have friends of mine who, the day before the inauguration, giving long diatribes and posts around jumping off ship from Facebook and other platforms and then moving to minority owned, Black owned, woman owned, et cetera, platforms that are smaller but aligned with their values, right? Some people making big grand announcements and other people just ghosting. Goodbye. They're like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And I can't say I blame them after reading through Meta's new anti-LGBTQIA policy and stance. Um, we already talked about this before about how they plan to end the third-party fact checking. And, you know, of course, here we go. Also, let's add them to the laundry list of organizations that are also stopping their specific DEI efforts. Hello. So even more of an umbrella problem. And so now let's add a couple more things on here. According to NBC, Meta will now allow for social media users to accuse people of being mentally ill based on their sexuality or gender identity. And with these new guidelines, this really it allows for certain things to happen that again roll us back into history in ways that we don't want to go back. They prohibit insults about someone else's intellect or mental health on Facebook, Instagram, or Threads, but their language says, quote, we do allow allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality and common non-serious usage of words like weird. So that's what the revised version of the policy say. Now, Lisa, I know we don't have time to go into all of it, but I'm very, very comfortable and well versed in the ugliness that has been the history of links between mental health, mental disorders, and quote unquote sexual deviation from the 60s, from around about 68. And so the LGBT community has experienced this arc of, how can I say, ongoing disassociation from mental disorders that has been fought for. And so the fact that now that Pandora's box has now been reopened, I thought we put enough nails in the top that it wouldn't be reopened, Lisa, but here we are. And so now we're back at putting the identities of LGBT folks and mental, quote unquote, mental disorders closer together. This is dangerous, Lisa. It's very dangerous. And, I've been at a crossroads for the last, few weeks now thinking about how I want to use or not use Meta and what does that look like, especially as just a person that has values, but also a person that has values that's also running a business, all those
Yeah.
things that I'm considering. And so, Lisa, how do you respond to all this? Because again, I'm very careful to say that I'm shocked because I'm usually not shocked.
Right.
Yet at the same time, we're left with a reality that if we say we're about it, let's be about it. And so, how can we be about it when Meta has kind of enwrapped our lives for, quite a while now?
Yeah, it is really a struggle. I had come off of Facebook several years ago. I still had my account, but I finally left it um, in January. And I was looking through my texts when you were talking, and this is what I put as to why I was deleting my account. Zuckerberg's complete and utter sellout and lack of concern for the LGBTQIA community, allowing hate speech because to moderate it is censorship. Are you fucking kidding me? my super constructive feedback to them about why I was leaving Facebook. But there wasn't room necessarily to say a whole lot more. But the Instagram piece, I'm still on Instagram, and largely because of this podcast and some other business stuff, right? So it is challenging to think about how to navigate that. How do you align your values? And also, we've talked about the power of the purse, right? And if you have money, spend it
That's it.
elsewhere.
That's it.
And
Yep.
so this is a piece of that too. But to have the money, you need to have business income. And that is part of that is the trap that you just articulated, being caught in all
Yes.
of these meta platforms, right? And
Yes. Yes.
we could move to Blue Sky. I have an account on Twitter, X, whatever, but I don't use it. So I could move that to Blue Sky, which is a Twitter X version, but I've never really used that. But I'm not sure the degree to which I could move to a platform similar to Facebook or Instagram. The volume of people in there is probably just not big enough. So I don't really know. I don't really know how to resolve that. My part of me is like, we should just get off Instagram. We should just do that, right? But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but that, because that's part of what being an ally and being an activist is we are making a decision that is harmful to us. Harmful, I use that word lightly, right? There is an impact that could be negative by taking our businesses
yes.
off of social media. But that's what it means, right? Like, you do it anyway. So I think that's something to think about. I mean, the other thing that, their policies now allow users to refer to transgender people or not non-binary people as it. I mean, that's what Meta's policies, the recent change in the last month is doing. And, under the guise of free speech,
Yeah.
that's not why, I don't even like that's sure, that's free speech, but why would you
Yeah.
want that speech, that dehumanizing speech on your platform? And so then I, as a user, I'm just enabling that. Right. But
Right.
then there's also the other thing about, like, I could also be a powerful voice in opposition to that on that same platform. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, Shaunna, on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't either. And I've especially, like I share with everybody, all of our listeners, I went through a 6 month entrepreneurship program in 2024 that culminated with uh, a strategic growth plan for our businesses, as small business owners, women business owners, minority business owners. Everybody in the room was one or more of being a woman, being disabled, being LGBT, being a veteran, person of color. That's all that filled this room. And I guarantee you, none of us, including myself, was thinking about what would we do if fill in the blank, right? We
Yeah.
talked about social media, and we even had social media plans that were connected to our business plans, but none of us thought about, in a very critical, real way, what do we do when the policies don't align with our business values for any of us?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
now, and this goes back to something that I've tried to work very hard on, but still I need to do better on, is I saw one entrepreneur that is African American woman owned business, small business, that said, hey, just in case they wipe all of these platforms out, go here to connect with my listserv or my newsletter or my website or what have you, where we got so complicated with the ways in which we communicate with potential folks that are our clients, that those complications were all put in someone else's hands that doesn't give a shit about us. And so how do we take it back out of their hands into our own, in places that we can control it more, right? So
Right.
for example, I have a few friends now that I'm really paying attention to what they're doing in the wake of. They are now moving from, for example, they're taking everything down off of Facebook and Instagram. They're keeping, for example, only LinkedIn and YouTube and their own website newsletters. And they're just making it very simple with the three, for example. We'll see how this goes. Or there are other folks that are like, okay, I'm a creator. I create content. And so I'm going to put this only on YouTube or fan base or Patreon, for example, because their values so far align with my values. But thinking about how it, again, we've talked about this before with social media, AI, and a number of different things. Those things we never thought would happen are now happening.
Right.
So for
Right.
everybody that is a business owner, or they're a communicator of some sort, or influencer or some sort, do you own everything you have? If all this shit shuts down tomorrow, could you be in contact with the people that you need to be in contact with? Could people
Mm-hmm.
find you that need to be able to find you? And I guarantee you the majority of us, including me, would have to say it'd be tough. It would be very
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It just feels so, it's so nakedly about profit for Zuckerberg because you're
Mm-hmm.
shifting your policies, the removal of DEI training
Yes.
and hiring and such because the quote unquote political winds have changed. Actually,
Yes.
that's not a quote from him, but that's kind of essentially what
Yeah.
he's saying,
Yeah.
right? And so you're like, so the right thing doesn't matter anymore. It's not about the right thing. It's not about creating a space where respect and dignity is afforded to every person, regardless of their political opinions, right? Like, so I can't tell someone I disagree with that they're a fucking moron, right? In the same way that they can't call me a bitch, for example, right? Like why wouldn't you want to foster a communication space like that rather than just say, sure, have at it, be, hate speech rules. I mean, we've got Twitter with Elon Musk and everything that he did. So it's just, yeah. So I think part of it then is figuring out now, Shaunna, how do you disentangle? How do you download? How
Yes.
do you maintain those connections or
Yes.
ignite those connections that you have through those spaces in different ways and then cut it? So maybe it's like it's a six
Mm-hmm.
month plan you have to do to kind of gradually withdraw and make sure that you're shifting all of those connections elsewhere.
So absolutely. And you know what? I know we don't have time to get into it right now, but a friend of mine mentioned, for example, fan base as one platform that a lot of creators use. And as you were speaking, I'm listening to you talk about the 6 month exit plan here from whatever
Right.
we may have been using previously. I'm looking up some of the inclusion policies on fan base, and listeners, please correct me because this is a quick and dirty version of this. But I Googled fan base and their policies, and they're very inclusive. But again, what you were mentioning before around what audience is already there, right? You can either have an audience of thousands in an environment that isn't ideal, or an
Yeah.
environment with a few hundred that is the perfect platform. Will that work for entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
There is that tipping point though, right? Like Blue Sky got like 2 million users at some
Mm-hmm.
point in late December, early January, like people flock to it, right? So there is a point at which you have like the early adopters, and then you have
Yes, yes,
a
yes.
couple more people that join those early adopters, and then the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
tips,
That's
right?
right. That's
So
right.
it could
That's
be that
right.
they're just not there yet, but in the course of the next 2 to 4 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Depending on what happens with these, with the Zuckerbergs of this world, then it might be that these other
Mm-hmm.
platforms do tip and become phenomenally
Well,
popular. I mean, we don't know.
Well, Lisa, let me just tell you real quick, and then we'll move on to the next phase here. But if it's any consolation and possibility for a tipping point here, in the other information about fan base, just as one example of many platforms that are probably out there that I'm not aware of, in December of this past year, so December of 2024, Fanbase was officially recognized as a minority business enterprise by the
Mm,
National Minority Supplier Development Council. And they have a very clear policy um, that it is a platform that's designed for every creator to thrive, regardless of race, religion, or background.
hmm hmm
And so, given that, you're right. once people may realize that and everybody tips in that direction, what then happens? So Lisa, I'm taking on your challenge as my challenge now. I think it's an excellent idea for anybody that's listening to join us in thinking about what's our 6-month exit plan. And
Mhm.
by, July, August, September, peace out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's fair.
Whew. All right. So be vigilant, folks, because I feel like these policy changes are going to be coming thick and fast in places that you would otherwise love to be. So
That's
be
it.
prepared. Be prepared, I guess.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. All right. Phase
Phase
two.
two.
What's up, Lisa? Phase two.
All right. So, Equal Rights Amendment. This is a little bit of an evergreen issue, right? Because the Equal Rights Amendment, meaning the an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that gives equal rights to women, or at least you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. Because yes, in 2025, we do not have the constitutional right to equality outside of the 14th Amendment and its equal protection of the laws clause. Anyway, so there was some hubbub that happened at the end of Biden's term that I just wanted to bring up here on the pod, because there's been a movement for some time now for Biden when he was first elected in 2020 to essentially instruct the National Archivist to formally log or document the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, as the 28th Amendment. Because in 2020, Virginia was the last state that was needed to ratify the amendment. So it's had a little bit of a checkered history. So basically, it was first passed in 1972. So for folks who don't know, to pass a constitutional amendment, you need 2/3 of Congress. It has to pass both houses of Congress by 2/3, and then it goes to the states, and you have to have 75%, 3/4 of the states have to ratify it, right? For whatever reason, Congress put a time limit on this. That is not normal or usual in constitutional amendments, but they did for this one, right? So the original 7-year deadline took it to 1979, and then they extended to 1982. 35 of the 38 states that were needed to ratify the ERA had done so by 1982. Then nothing, right? Until Trump was elected in his first term. Nevada ratified it in 2017, Illinois in 2018, and then, like I said, in 2020, Virginia became that 38th state to ratify. There were 5 states in that intervening period who rescinded their ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, although that is legally dubious because there's not really much precedence for states rescinding. Because if you think about it, like the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, what if Southern states had rescinded their support for those amendments? Would the 13th, 14th, and 15th not have become amendments? Probably not, right? So anyway, long story short, Biden, in like the final days of his presidency, was like, the Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land. It is the 28th Amendment of the Constitution, but I'm not going to tell the National Archivist to do it, to log it. And the reason, the National Archivist is an appointed position. So we now know that whomever Trump appoints is not going to do it, right? But they were arguing that they weren't legally allowed to do it because there was a DOJ opinion that said because of the deadline and the time that has passed, it's no longer viable. But if Biden is coming out and saying it is the law of the land, then he is implicitly saying that that Department of Justice memo is not correct anymore. Although he didn't actually say that, he just said the other thing, right? So if the National Archivist is saying, I can't log this amendment because of the DOJ memo, but then the president is saying that's not a thing anymore, but doesn't explicitly ask the National Archivist to log the amendment, how then is the amendment going to be an amendment to the Constitution a mere number of days from when the Trump administration is going to come in and doesn't give a shit about women's rights, right?
Performative.
So yeah, so
Performative.
totally performative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so infuriating, Shaunna, because he had 4 years.
4
He
years.
had
Yeah.
4 years to do this. And all he would have needed to do was rescind that DOJ memo after Virginia had ratified it and
Mm-hmm.
and instructed the National Archivist to log it. Because then you get the 28th Amendment, right? It's printed, it's there.
Yep.
And then, okay, Republicans or conservatives, you fight that out in court. You fight that you are against the Equal Rights Amendment, against equal rights for women. You do that because you're going to look just lovely, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm so infuriated by Democrats, Shaunna. Like, if the shoe was on the other foot and it were Republicans, they would have just done it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They would
Anyway,
have just done it. They would have just done it. And it's particularly embarrassing for a number of reasons. First, because you finally have a woman as a vice president. That's number one. Number two, you have 4 years to get it done. Number three, it is a chess move. One of the things that I'm learning from people who play chess is that the really good chess players always think at least 6 moves ahead. The chess masters think 10 moves ahead.
yes, that's
And
great. Yes.
so as I'm thinking about those executive orders that were signed, in the last days of office, that's like 6 steps ahead. I appreciate that. And at the same time, 10 steps ahead would have been doing this shit to begin with and
Yeah.
letting that shit ride for years and
Uh-huh.
make them look like a complete ass as they're fighting something that took so long to get to that point. So I don't think the Biden administration was playing good chess on this because you have to outthink the thinker. And they
Mm-hmm.
didn't do that. They didn't do that at all. So again, so close yet so far away. And so then you have these empty gestures of support that drive people like you and I to madness where we're ready to, you know, damn near register as independent because I keep looking at, I mean, it still feels like a two-party country in that you can't get things
Right.
done in a way that sticks.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually am registered as an independent.
I'm not, but I'm seriously thinking about it, Lisa. I'm seriously thinking about it.
It's just, and
It's
Biden in
maddening.
particular is such an institutionalist, and I think I probably lean more
Mm-hmm.
that way, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to a fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your respect for the process and the institutions failed you in that
Mm-hmm.
you had the opportunity and the power to do something about it and you didn't, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you think all the way back to Roe versus Wade, when that Supreme Court case first came out in the early 70s that affirmed the right to reproductive health care, and more specifically in abortion, in the right to privacy in the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution, all the people in favor were like, we don't need to pass a law. It's fine. The Supreme Court, it's never going to get overruled, right? And as those years ticked on, that became a more entrenched opinion. The Supreme Court has ruled this is a constitutional right. It's now precedent. They're never going to go back on it. Think about all those opportunities across all those Democratic presidents when they had Democratic House and a Democratic Senate,
Mm-hmm.
and they could have passed a federal law that would have enshrined, that would have also doubly enshrined a right
Yes.
to an abortion. And they didn't do it because they stuck on this. The Supreme Court has
Mm-hmm.
spoken and they value precedent and they won't go back. And look what happened 50 fucking years later, right?
Exactly.
50 years. Like, and they had so many opportunities.
Yeah, so they played the 6 moves ahead and didn't play the 10, and here we
Well,
are.
I don't even know that they played 6 moves ahead. I mean, your chess analogy is a brilliant one, and I know we've had one of our favorite episodes from years
Oh,
ago
yeah,
now
that's
is
right.
chess, right? Right.
That's
But
right. I
see,
forgot about that.
the conservative movement and the Republican Party specifically has been playing chess with the courts for 50, 60 years.
Oh, yeah,
The
for sure.
Dems are just like, do, right? It'll all work
That's
because,
right.
you know, and
That's right.
it's Michelle Obama's go low, we go high. And I don't in principle disagree with that sentiment. But going
Mm-hmm.
high and believing that these institutions are going to stand and that the right thing is going to
Right.
uh
Right.
dude, you part your son and some family members which, while I may or may not disagree, is still a bit fishy. And you
Right.
couldn't instruct the archivist to log the 28th Amendment to give women equal rights in the Constitution? Like, what the hell?
Well, it's I know we got to get to phase 3, but it feels like a too little too late. Very can
Yes,
I be petty for a quick second? It
do it.
feels like a too little too late moment, parallel to how many days did Kamala Harris get to pull together one of the most
Right.
brilliant campaigns in history? Too little
Yes,
too
yes,
late.
yes. Yep,
Too little
yep.
too late when it comes to women. Too little too late.
Yeah,
Every single
100%.
time. Every single time. Yeah, might be 2 moves of chess here, Lisa, if that much, but it definitely um begs the question of, you know, when they go low, we go high. That only works when more people go high than go low.
Yeah.
And that's not happening in this country right now.
No, and it wouldn't have been breaking the law either. Like from a
Not
low,
at
if you like,
all. Not at all.
it just would have been a
Strategy.
a strategy and a use of your power given the stakes, right?
There you go. There you go.
So,
Within the boundaries. Yep, within the
yeah.
boundaries.
All
So,
right.
oh Lord. So, yes, I've, yeah, I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave that
Yeah,
alone.
okay. All right. So what do we got for
All right.
phase three?
Phase three.
Take us
Phase
home. Take
three.
us home.
Okay, so what I think is fascinating, and again, this goes back to Lisa, how many days or weeks is it, Lisa, in the UK or in other countries that they get to campaign? It's very short, right? Like
In the
6 weeks,
UK, I
maybe?
think it's like 6 to 10, something like that. I forget
That's what I
exactly.
thought.
Yeah.
So, given that the US has I feel like the infinity sign, right? We have an infinite time of campaigning in this country. What boggles the mind is to have such a long, exhaustive campaign cycle in this country, yet still almost being over informed. We still have an electorate that does not vote for the people that align with their own issues and interests. It is the most mind boggling thing on the planet. I don't understand it, Lisa. Um, it's, what does my grandmother say all the time? She said it's like voting for the fox to guard the hen house. No, you don't vote for the fox to guard the hen house because the fox is going to eat the eggs, boo boo. Okay, that's how that works. And so I feel like that's exactly what happens or what has happened. And let me give you an example. So in 2024 in Missouri, voters approved a constitutional amendment protecting the right to an abortion. Okay. Now, prior to that, in 2019, Missouri lawmakers had enacted a near total ban. Okay. So now in 2025, here we are, and Missouri lawmakers are trying to enact restrictions in spite of the constitutional amendment in the state. And so, with this, again, this is yet another example of how, first, the electorate doesn't vote or doesn't vote for lawmakers that align with their values. I guess it's just a daggone congeniality contest here. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, when does the vote stand? Right. So it's almost like, oh, well, we're going to vote. We're going to put the vote out to the electorate. The electorate is going to vote. And then lawmakers say, oh, well, they didn't cover these areas, so let's create some loopholes. Let's create a new law and put that law forth. Or it just feels like this circumvention of the system and the way in which it was created. And so it's never really about what the people want as a conduit. So, for example, if I'm a lawmaker, which is, I think that's the reason why there's congressional hearings and other things that really make us think about this. If I'm a lawmaker, let's say I'm whatever, senator, house, whatever, and the electorate has voted for me, and I've been specifically put in that seat to represent the people, but my decision making doesn't represent the people, then maybe I just
Right.
won the miscongeniality contest
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm still not representing the people. So why be there?
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't. I mean, it reminds me of going back to that old movie, Miss Congeniality, where they're in this beauty contest and they just vote on the person that they like the most. That's their friend, but doesn't think, isn't intellectual, isn't cognizant. They just, oh well, I like them, but we don't agree. Excuse me, liking them adversely affects your life.
Right.
If we're limiting
Yeah.
to just liking the person or the person being affable or whatever it is, then you're still, I could almost vote for anybody if they align with my values when it's time to make decisions. So how is it that we are so hypocritical that we say, oh, this is what I believe in, but I'm going to vote for a bunch of people that don't give a shit about what I believe? What was the point then? What was the point?
Mm-hmm.
We've done an
Mm-hmm.
intellectual exercise that we all failed.
Yeah, this Missouri thing is fascinating. So I'm a voter and I vote to enshrine a right to abortion in my constitution, while at the very same time voting for a lawmaker who had previously voted to enact those really stringent, near total ban on abortion a few years prior. So I'm casting my ballot for those two things at the same time that are in opposition to each other. So that's one thing, which is your point, right? Like, what the heck is going on there? The other thing is like, with the abortion issue in particular, the Supreme Court, quote unquote, sent it back to the states, blah, 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 right? Democratic policy should be left to the states. So it was left to the state of Missouri. They voted a constitutional amendment. So what the F are you doing, lawmakers, to say, how can we run an end
Right.
run around this constitutional amendment because we don't like it? Which goes back to your point, Shaunna, about you have been elected to represent a group of people. That group of
Representation.
people
Yes.
voted to enshrine the right. So it really doesn't matter what you think because there is now a constitutional amendment on the books. So it's just, yeah, just mind boggling to me. And I think part of this is this deep polarization that we have in this country that folks are
Mm-hmm.
not looking at the actual. Well, okay. One, I don't think lawmakers write out their policy positions in a way that is useful. Two, I don't think
Agreed.
the average person even looks to the policy positions. They're just like,
Agreed.
R, D, yes, please, I am going to vote that way.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
then,
Yes,
then a lawmaker's like, well, no one's even looking at my policy positions. They're just voting for me because I'm a Democrat or Republican. So why do I
that's
even
it.
bother? I'm not even going to take the time to articulate a policy position because it
That's
doesn't
it.
matter. And so the cycle feeds itself.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. It's the so Lisa, we may want to help me out with this, Lisa. This
Okay.
this will this will be the feather in the cap of this episode if we can figure out some language for this. So Lisa, you know how you have educated me on the concept of the nonprofit starvation cycle, where it continues to be this cyclical process of organizations doing more work, not getting what they need, but they continue to do more work to prove that they can do more work without the money that they need. Like it just feels like this ongoing
Right.
cycle. I'm I'm drawing a intellectual parallel here between
Mm-hmm.
I vote for people that I like, not the people that hold my interest. And then here we go, where those people vote against me, and then I get mad about it, but I vote for the people that I like, and the people that I like keep voting against me. And I could keep perpetuating such a cycle in such a way that I become oblivious to understanding, well, I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand why things aren't going towards my way and my interest, but I voted for this person because I like Lisa's haircut and glasses. What? I feel like we are in a political starvation cycle where we keep voting. I mean, I know we've used the language constantly about how we vote against our own issues or our own interests, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it is, we are constantly voting for people thinking that we have some type of human connection or a commonality with them, only to find out that we are hustling backwards here, voting for people that are going to vote or make decisions opposite of us, or simply don't do anything at all, which to me gets even more dangerous, where
Mm-hmm.
they're apathetic to our interests. And so, how do we continue hustling backwards in this cycle of not making very clear connections? That to me, it's very linear, Lisa. I believe this. I vote for a person who has similar interests. Hopefully, enough of us vote to get them in office, and then they help to create or block policy, law that contradicts what I believed in the first place. To me, that's very linear. For other people, it seems like it's disjointed like a bunch of Legos. And I'm like, no, it is very much connected. And why you don't see that is beyond me. But you're voting yourself into a starvation cycle and then wondering, how did we get here? I know how we got here. You voted for the popular person, not for the person that holds your interest. You're starving yourself. That's on you. You're starving yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the term you're looking for is a doom loop, which is a
Oh, give it to me. Okay, to educate me, educate
I
me,
did not come up with that. There's a
educate
book.
me.
There's a book that was written called The Two-Party Doom Loop, and it's basically this, it's the
Oh,
spiral that you're
mm-hmm,
suggesting, like this
mm-hmm,
downward spiral, and it's a doom loop. I forget the author of the book, but I can put a link in the show notes about
mm-hmm.
it. But I feel like I'm I think there's two things here, because you're talking about popularity, like, or not popularity even. Like, I like Shaunna, so I'm gonna vote for her. I'm not paying much attention to her policy positions. But that is different and from I'm going to vote for Shaunna because she has a D after her name and I'm not paying any attention to her policy positions.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I do think the likability piece is in there, because even with the D after your name, if I think you're an asshole, would I vote for you? Maybe. Some people might because of the polarization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
That's
so
right.
there's a couple of things happening there. And then I also think it's this thing that has happened with Trump, that he or she is not going to do that. Where if the
Oh.
constitutional amendment
Mm-hmm.
passes, then it's done, right? So then this person I voted for is going to do all the other things that I like. It's it's a
Yes. Mm-hmm.
it's a naive belief that a an elected representative who doesn't share my opinion on one issue is going to accept a majority vote that is not in alignment with them, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
there's that. Okay, I don't know if I articulated that very well, but I feel like there is a yeah, it's a naivety that,
Mm.
even though I know, like, so let's say there's going to be a portion of the Missouri public who knew that the person they voted for had previously tried to ban abortion, but they're
Yes.
probably thinking, but I'm going to vote yes on this constitutional amendment, and if it passes, then Joe Schmo over here isn't going to be able to do anything about it because it's a constitutional amendment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. They thought they kind of forced their hand only to find out that their
yes.
their hand is is protesting.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly. And then
Uh,
there in Missouri, or in equally a state that has kind of an entrenched Democratic rule,
mm-hmm,
there's
mm-hmm.
no electoral competition to make me as a legislator more responsive to my community, because it doesn't matter. So I don't care that you
Yes.
did this constitutional amendment. No one's going to vote me out. So I'm just going to try and create some strategies to override the constitutional amendment, because it doesn't matter what you
Mm-hmm.
said, elector. It matters what I
I
think as the
think
elected
yes,
representative.
yes, because I'm here now.
Yeah. So I don't know. So to some, that's likability for some people. That's not for others. But I think I think your cycle still holds, that there is a misunderstanding, misapprehension, naivety, whatever it is that is fueling this inconsistency with who you're voting for vis-a-vis your interest or policy positions.
Look, let me tell you, it very much reminds me of because when someone says because I said so. So the electorate voted for whatever, and because I said so, you have to run with it, lawmaker. And the lawmaker says, no, I don't.
Right.
Let me work
Yes.
around it. Let me work through it. Let me find the loop of the loophole. Let me create a loophole because what you say matters less.
Yeah.
Matters less. I mean, it's a nice reference point to know that this percentage of people support and this percentage agrees, but it's not the period at the end of the sentence at all to a
Right.
lawmaker that's trying to work around.
Yeah. So we'll send this issue back to the states because that's democracy. The people get to vote, but I'll only agree with it if it goes my way.
Right, because the people's
Right.
vote is a suggestion.
Yeah.
It's a suggestion, or it's just simply a point of thank you for informing me of how you feel, but as a lawmaker, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah. And this happened in Florida several years ago. The electorate voted for, I think it was a constitutional amendment that
Mm,
gave people who
mhm.
had previously been convicted of felonies who have since left, who have since served their time, I think it was, get their right to vote back. And the Florida legislature said, we don't agree with the fact that the population of Florida voted for this. So they created all these barriers that essentially meant that no, it's not just that you've served your time, you have to pay all your fines and fees. And only when all that is done do you
Mm,
get your vote back.
mm.
And we know
Right,
that people
right.
who have been incarcerated are mostly low income, are buried under all of the fines and fees. And to be able to
Yes,
pay that
yes.
back is really, really hard. And it certainly doesn't happen quickly if they're able
That's
to do
right.
it. And
That's
so that
right.
was another end run around the will of the people. And again, those Florida legislators aren't threatened because they're all
Hmm.
gerrymandered and safe in their seats. So,
Oh, Lord. Yes, yes, yes,
but
exactly.
I feel like I feel like your point for this phase is that it's just getting worse,
Oh, for
right?
sure. For sure. So look, instead of the doom loop, it must be the doom spiral because it's not getting any better. And it definitely isn't getting any better when you have someone that is sitting in the White House that completely models it. We talk about
Right.
modeling behavior all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's modeling the, yes, I know what the systems are, but I don't care.
Gonna do what I want.
I'm going to do what I want to do. That's a nice suggestion, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And so that's when things continue to unravel because you have someone in the highest post in the land that decides that they're going to do what they want to do and people follow suit. The
Yeah.
fish rots from the head, girl. Fish rots from the head every single time.
Well, there's a name for this episode. The
Every
fish
time.
rots from the head.
Look, we're gonna start paying my grandmother I don't know what you'd call it, a royalty or something, because most of my quips are coming from her, y'all. I promise you. But it is a modeling piece. I'm gonna leave it there. It's modeling, and
No.
you know what what legislator wouldn't say, well, look, the president can do it, so why can't
Yeah.
I?
No, 100%. I just think my frustration and animation is just going to continue to ramp up over the next 4 years. So be ready, Shaunna and listeners.
Well, tomorrow, whoever's running in 4 years is already going to start dropping
Yes.
breadcrumbs. So it's not like we're getting out of this election cycle. You know that,
No,
right?
I was going to say the midterms have already started.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
never out of it. Never out of it. So anyway, all right. Well, look, you got Lisa over here is independent, Shaunna that's flirting with it, and we're all disgusted. So here we are. But oh, all right. Well, this is a wrap on this week's episode of Unfazed Unedited. So please reach out to us. You can find us in previous episodes on YouTube at Unfazed Unedited. Of course, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Instagram, you can find us there at Unfazed Pod. Of course, to LinkedIn Unfazed Pod. But let me be clear. Now that Lisa's thrown it out there, we may revamp. You never know. You never know. We may revamp our strategy here. But we do have our website. That really is the anchor. So go to unfazedpodcast.com where you can find everything archived shows, new shows. And if you like this week's episode, then please continue to like, subscribe, leave a review, share the podcast with your friends or coworkers. The person that you text in the middle of the day about the foolishness that's going on in your federal or state legislature, yeah, send this podcast to them. How about that? But until next week, I'll see you, Lisa.
All right. See ya.